So it's clear that the big three of LeBron, AD, and Westbrook was an absolute failure. But there's been a common misconception that I've been hearing recently, and that's the fact that big threes are no longer the way to go in the league if you want to win a championship. Now, while there's some validity to that statement, it's not entirely true. So let's see where this logic is coming from. Currently in the finals, you have two teams with one or two great players and a very good, very deep supporting cast. If you look back at the champions the last few years, they have been made up of teams with one or two great players with a great supporting cast. Even the Lakers themselves had two great players with LeBron and Anthony Davis, and a great supporting cast the year they won the championship. But now we look at this season, and the teams with big threes did terribly. Obviously, the Lakers didn't even make the playoffs and had one of the worst seasons, if not the worst season in franchise history. Then you have the Nets, who got swept in the first round. And now you have people proclaiming that the big three is dead. But the thing that they conveniently leave out is that these big threes aren't actually big threes. You got two superstars in LeBron and AD, but then you got one of the worst players this season, Russell Westbrook. You can't call that a big three. It might even be a big 1.5 because Westbrook is a negative value to the team. Now with the Nets, you have Harden, who's not playing like a top 10 player, Kyrie, who couldn't play half the games because of his vaccination status, and KD, who also missed a significant amount of time due to injury. The Lakers were also dealing with injuries to their superstars. So for most nights, it was just a big 1, and at best, a big 1.5. A big three has to actually have 3 superstars, or 2 superstars and 1 really good all-star caliber player. Now I get it, injuries are a part of the game, and that's one of the drawbacks of having a big three or forming a super team. You have all this money tied up to these max contracts, and so you're only left with minimum contracts to fill out the rest of the roster. This means that the role players are not going to be very good. So for these teams to actually work, all 3 players of the big three need to be performing at a high level, and they need to actually be available to play in games. So you can't use this season to completely disregard big threes as a viable championship strategy, because these teams don't actually have big threes. If the Lakers had a real big three, let's say it included LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Giannis, you're telling me that team's not a contender? Or what if a healthy Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Nikola Jokic were on one team? That team wouldn't be a contender? Big threes can still work, you just have to have the right players. They need to be 3 superstars with at least 2 of them being top 10 players. And of course, they need to be healthy. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe the Lakers shouldn't have gone for the big three this season. They should have instead used all that money to surround LeBron and AD with quality role players that could shoot threes, play defense, and stay healthy. But because all their money was tied up to Westbrook's ridiculous contract, we instead had to fill the roster with old players that were halfway into retirement and that couldn't play defense, couldn't consistently shoot, and were sitting out half of the games either due to injury or simply them not being good enough to be on the floor. But the Lakers' mistake wasn't wanting to form a big three. We've seen time after time throughout the history of the NBA that formula is successful in winning championships. The Lakers' mistake was thinking Westbrook could be a part of a big three. Their mistake was thinking that Westbrook was still a superstar. And of course, none of that is true. Even if he was still playing at his peak level, he's not a good fit playing alongside LeBron. There's nothing wrong with the big three. There's something wrong with this particular big three. So now, yeah, the trendy thing in the NBA is to have just one or two superstars or all-star caliber players and surrounding them with a very good supporting cast. But trends come and go, and we may see a big three formed in the near future. If the right big three comes along, I'm sure a team won't hesitate to try and form it. You just have to make sure you have the right players.